Oh, probably take these off now. Had a very late meeting, so I was doing like last second audio checks to make sure my audio sounded all right, and it wasn't like, bad dubs of old Hong Kong flicks where it's like, and then you hear the audio. Oh man, happy Tuesday, everybody! I've had a heck of a week. We're in playoff football. That's always interesting. Good to see you. Thank you for everybody showing up. Uh, might be some late tricklers in because I know my buddy Alex. It's his birthday. He's doing like a birthday live stream, so we'll see how that happens. Mr. Courtney, I see you in chat there, sir. Good to see you, buddy. We need to get together and have some lunch or something sometime soon. We need to talk. But yeah, good to see everybody. Let's see what updates can I talk about before we get to the topic while we let some people filter in. I added some new plants to Fallen Forest, which you guys will get to see. Oh, Mario, sure, we can talk. We can talk briefly football. Predictions for the Super Bowl. I honestly think it'll be the 49ers and someone else. It's really hard to tell whether it'll be like the Chiefs, the Bills, or the Bengals, because I think they're all equally good and they each have their own inherent flaw. But it would be interesting to see the Giants like somehow sneak their way through. Just because like so many people wrote off good old Danny Dimes, their quarterback, and he's been playing pretty well this year. Similarly, if I really could, I would love to see the Jaguars make it through, just because it would be hilarious to go from effectively one of the worst teams in the NFL the previous year under a quarterback that everybody thinks is, or under a coach that everybody thought was going to be amazing in Urban Meyer, and then to be just like completely flipped. And yeah, I mean, like I'm a Seahawks fan, right? So watching the 49ers basically demolish my team in a single quarter sucked. But I spent a lot of time with Cousin Henry during that football game, so it was good. Me and Cousin Henry just kind of had some good time. We babbled, we chatted. Going to be helping Cousin Henry with a couple things here in the near future, so we might do some fish-related stuff at the same time. We're talking about doing some things with his one tank that he's got and maybe turning that into more than one tank because he's got a turtle in there and he kind of wants to give the turtle its own place and then have an appropriate tank for the rest of the fish. And we were babbling. I was there for like, I don't know, like 6 hours, 7 hours. I went there a little early. We spent some time together just chatting, watched the game, all that kind of stuff, right? So, yeah. My team fumbled the game away at the 1 yard line. Oof. Yeah. So I assume that you mean the quarterback sneak that went horribly wrong. And yeah. It's unfortunate, man. My team just like forgot how to play for one quarter and just got the heck beat out of them. Okay. We'll get on topic and not babble football too much for the people who don't like football being like, I thought this was a fish live stream. Oh, man. Okay, so canister filters. And the reason why this is our topic, right? I'm putting a canister filter on Fallen Forest. And that canister is here. It's like sitting downstairs. But there's a potential that we could do something different as well. So I wanted to talk about kind of like the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to canister filters. So I think it's an interesting topic. Of course, have people like Corey from the Aquarium Co-op who does not like canister filters. And then you've got some people who I would argue somebody like Jay Wilson kind of swears by them, right? So there's I hope you guys don't hear the dog in the background losing its mind, but one of the dogs is losing its mind. Probably Papalimo. That's what it sounds like. Anyway, so let's talk the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to canister filters. Now, I think the common perception with most canister filters is they're the go-to when you start getting to larger tanks, right? You get to a large enough tank, and it might be like, well, I could either get a bunch of hang-on backs and mix them with some stuff. Like, I don't know that sponges are going to be enough. Maybe I need something big and powerful to get that higher flow rate and that turnover and that bio capacity. Let's look at a canister filter. They're also kind of the go-to for most of your high-end aquascapes because you can hide a lot of your equipment. And you can use things like those beautiful glass lily pipes or stainless steel if you like that look. Instead of like, the as much as I love some of the fluval filters, I hate that like ribbed tubing they use because it just looks so ugly, and it's actually not that great for your water flow because it leaves little pockets where stuff can gather up instead of a smooth pathway. So let's talk. So I would say canister filters, there's often a perception that they're mostly for big tanks, but that's not true. Because even Kaylee in chat here is saying, like, how big for a canister filter? Like 55 gallons? No, because you can see... Kingfisher's Catcher killed me. Just quit playing to my 12-year-old sense of humor. You're killing me, man. But, but you'll often see canisters on much smaller tanks. It's just about having either adjustable flow or selecting a set of equipment that could go with it that helps inherently remove some of that flow. So some examples would be, there's like the littler version of the Owaze canisters. Eheim, like one of the standards in the industry, has they're like compact canisters that are really designed for much smaller tanks. For the longest time, I had basically the smallest Eheim canister on an 8-gallon tank. And with a spray bar, it really doesn't have a super high flow rate. So it's not too excessive, right? So it becomes a matter of equipment. We can bring them down to much smaller ones. But also, we've got big boys like the FX6. Eheim has their giant, like, what is it, E9000 or whatever it is, the bucket with a pump on top. We also have these, like, super high-end canister filters. So somebody asked about the F-Zone Astra. There's, like, the ADA Superjet. And I think GLA, if I remember right, makes their own version. It's basically the F-Zone one, but their own version of that same, like, solid stainless steel body. You can look at the Owaze, like, Biomasters, because they are kind of a higher end canister filter that has a few extra bells and whistles compared to, say, we could go really old school and look at things like the Magnum filters that Marineland made, or something like the old Rena XP3, which now is the API filter. There's a lot. There's a ton of canister filters out there. But in the end, they all fall into the same thing. It's a larger bodied filter that typically has either A, some trays, or B, just a big open space designed for you to fill with media, and usually has either a pump built into the bottom or the top. So, like an example, the FX6 has that pump down low in the bottom of the canister, right? Whereas the Eheims and the Fluval, like 07 series, the canister is the top of the canister, the lid of the canister, has a pump motor built in. And then you have other things like those F-Zone Astras or the ADA Superjet, where the pump is literally on top of the lid of the canister filter, right? So there's kind of 3 different arrangements of pumps, but they're all doing the same thing. They have a stronger pump in them. They have a much larger area to hold media, so they can, in theory, have a much larger bio capacity. Because they have larger bio capacity, often this means that we don't need to service them quite as often. But the negative, and the thing that a lot of people hate, is servicing a canister filter is a pain in the butt. There's so much more to clean. Disassembly takes time. They hold a lot more water, whereas like a hang on the back sits there, and if you just remove the tray that has all your media in it, because almost every hang on the back has a tray, the water can keep pumping and moving, right? You can't do that with a canister filter. The pump relies on the entire thing being assembled. So you're stopping everything to clean that thing out. And what might take you 10 minutes on an aqua clear, hang on the back, is probably going to take you at least 20 minutes, possibly much, much longer, depending on how dirty or how tightly packed your canister filter is. If you're not using ways to contain your media, like those E-heims or the F-zones, where they have this just big open container, it's just you figure it out how you want to pack it. If you're not using something like mesh bags, you've got a bunch of just bare bones media in there that you now have to get out and clean and then re-put in there, right? So if you're not realizing what that can mean to your maintenance schedule, you can be in for a world of hurt trying to clean those things. Now, several of your canister filters have really easy ways to prime them built in. If you think about like the Biomasters, they have that big plunger basically on top, which is a design that comes from E-heim. E-heim did that on some of their big, the professional ones that have the big like plunger circle on the top that can help prime. You have other canisters like the FX6 that basically just auto prime. As long as they get water flow into them, they will auto prime themselves. You have like the little pump that's in the top of the 07, 06, 05s, right? It's that little bitty thing that feels like it's fragile and going to break at any given moment. You have other ones that actually have like a little lever arm you can use depending on how old you want to go. All sorts of crazy nonsense, right? But is that what we actually care about in the canister? Not really. We don't care so much about self-priming. Some people do, but it really comes down to this. When we look at a canister, it's usually because we either need that higher flow rate from that stronger pump, or we're not trying to have like 5 hang-on backs for a big tank. We're trying to do one much bigger, more powerful filter to minimize the number of things we have to maintain. If we don't have to maintain 4 filters, we only have to maintain 1. The perception is it's less work. And often with a canister filter, they allow us a little bit of wiggle room to be a little lazier on their service because they're such big machines and have much more powerful and durable pumps in them that can often get a little dirtier before we really got to go like, okay, I'm really losing flow. I got to clean this thing. But that's the biggest negative. Cleaning canister filters is probably the biggest reason why a lot of people hate them. Right? Because if you're like me and you look at an FX6 and you're like, I should service that thing, I don't know if I want to take that much time. Right? Because you've got all sorts of things, takes all sorts of time. When you do stop the flow, it doesn't have a perfect way to necessarily get all the water out, so you might like remove a tube and it starts spraying some excess water all over the place. Not a ton, but just enough to be annoying, right? There's all these things that can make the service of a canister filter make you keep putting it off more, right? You could look at it and be like, I don't know that I've got enough time to service this thing right now. Obi-Tony Kenobi is saying, like, not if you have an Awaze Biomaster. You do still need to eventually service it. Like, your pre-filters don't save you from everything. You do need to eventually clean out the entire canister. And in some cases, depending on the pre-filters you're using, like in my case, I have a Biomaster, okay? And my Biomaster now has an intake sponge on its intake as well as the pre-filters, because it would clog up so fast because of that stupid 60 ppi foam that's in it. And I bought replacement foam, by the way. I went down to the 40 ppi foam. But it would still clog up relatively fast because there's just enough plant matter and there's some plecos and some other stuff going on there that enough sludge would get into it that I would start losing flow and need to do it every week. And some weeks I'm just super busy. Some weeks I have so many things I need to take care of. I struggle to force time into my schedule to do some of that work. And then it gets put off. And then I realize, like, oh, I'm dealing with this problem because I don't have my water flow correct. And now I've got a stupid outbreak of cyanobacteria, right? Can't tell you, I've had a couple outbreaks of cyanobacteria, and it's all been around like, okay, well, I got this event coming up and I'm doing this thing and I got this and I'm trying to figure out that time to do service. It can get tough. But admittedly, if you take the 15 minutes it takes to service an Awaze's pre-filters, and if you have a better sink than I do, it's probably only like 10 minutes tops, right? I don't have a very good sink in my house. I need like a proper workstation sink to do this correctly with a big sprayer on top, because that'd be so much more helpful. But if you do have those things, or you have something that you've got it down to a system where, hey, this takes me 5 to 10 minutes, and I get it reprimed and ready to go, and I do it once a week like clockwork, great. My question would be, are you managing like 20 tanks like I am? Because I've got a lot of different filters I need to rotate between cleaning. So sometimes something gets put off. And that's where something like an FX6 or an Eheim can be appealing, because those things can take a ton of abuse. But when you do their maintenance, it's way more work. So an example, somebody asked this earlier, like, how do you make the maintenance on an FX6 easier? And my short answer to you is this. Whenever you're doing the maintenance on it, you basically are really only doing a light rinse of the media that's inside those trays, right? And then your sponges. And what I would do, honestly, if you're concerned about the maintenance time, is don't worry about having the extra foam in the center trays. Just have media bags there, because media bags are a fast rinse, and then you're only worried about cleaning out those external sponges on the rim. You might have one sponge at the very bottom, right? Because of how the flow rate goes. Hold on. I have to remember the flow pattern of an FX6. It's been a while. But you might have just one tray that has sponge in it, but don't put sponge in every tray. Like, all you're really trying to do is, FX6s are really, really durable. Don't worry about having super fine polishing in an FX6. Put your fine polishing somewhere else that's easier to service quickly. Have a hang on the back whose whole job is to be the polisher in your tank. If you're really caring about polish work, right? That's really all it comes down to. Leave that in a more coarse way. You want this to be your workhorse and have a huge bio capacity. With larger canisters, I think the real problem that steers people away from canisters is they try too hard to have the canister do everything. And realistically, what we should be looking at canisters as is coarse mechanical filtration and high biocapacity and reasonable flow rate. Because if we leave it coarse, like, are they going to clean all the particulates out of the water? No. They'll clean some of the big chunky stuff, but then they'll keep moving water through. And then after that, you can either use something like a power head attached to some kind of fine filter mesh. There's lots of cheap ways to do this as just a polisher, or just have one hang on back like an AquaClear or what have you. Probably AquaClear, you don't necessarily want to go with a title because of the way the titles are designed, in order to just do your polishing. And literally the only thing that sits in that AquaClear is that big thick sponge and then filter matting. And it's stuff that you just want to replace. You're just removing it and getting rid of it and putting new filter batting in, or whether you actually use like the pads versus the stuff that you would use as an insert for pillows and things like that at a craft store. I'm forgetting the name of the product goes under. Polyfill. Thank you, Moby Dick of Dopetus. Polyfill. Right? And there's a lot of people who do just use exactly what Moby Dick of Dopetus just said. You have a part of a water bottle that you cut off, tie it into a power head with polyfill in it, and that acts as your polisher. And you don't even have to have that thing in the tank the entire time. You can literally run it for a day before if you got somebody coming over that's going to look at your aquarium, or maybe you're doing pictures or you want to do a video. You just run it for a day. it'll really clean up stuff. So we have the big positives are huge biocapacity and usually a much stronger pump. But the negatives tend to be on the maintenance side of things. But we can make adjustments to fix that, right? Like just like how we hot rod our hang on back filters, you can kind of hot rod a canister filter. Put an intake sponge on it if it's not like the FX. It's a little tough on the FX series because of that big oval intake that they use. It's possible still. But using these things help you to minimize the amount of gunk getting in there, and thus, much like the pre-filter that's on the Awaze, minimize the frequency in which you have to do the big full maintenance. If you use that thing to get all the mechanical stuff, less and less of that gunk is getting into your big filter, so you don't have to service it as often. And all of a sudden, that concept of like, oh, I've got to service this thing every 3 months, and it takes me like XYZ time period. Now it's like, I really only got to service this thing like once every 9 months to a year. That's not so bad. Or maybe every 6 months. Twice a year to spend half an hour. That's not so bad. Right? You know, little things like that. There's little ways that we can make these changes. Or step it all the way up and start doing a sum. Now, the last part here. There was a question earlier in chat asking about the F-Zone Astro, right? Which is kind of the much cheaper version of the ADA Superjet. And I have thought about putting that on the Fallen Forest tank. And I actually I kind of want to allow you guys here to, make a decision. What is this? Hold on. I'm putting a poll together. One sec. I just want to see your guys' input. Bam. So, Fluval reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to test their new FX2. So the FX2 is like a smaller version of the FX4. It's very, very similar. It has the same number of trays in it, but it's it's designed to fit inside cabinets and be a little easier to hide. Or we have something like the F-Zone Astro. I'm curious at like a snap decision what you guys are interested in. Do you want like the super fancy filter and for me to just actually put this thing through some paces? Or would you rather see that big blue ball monstrosity on Fallen Forest? So that's for you guys to give me your input. I'm very curious. We'll dive into some chats, but basically, I'm curious about your guys' opinion there because I can do both happily. It is a little tough with a rimmed tank to find equipment, like fancier equipment, right? Because the F-Zone doesn't come with an intake and outlet. It's usually designed to go with like you go get the stainless steel stuff or you get the glass stuff, but almost all of that has been designed for rimless tanks. And by the way, like I will try both of these things probably. Like I'm gonna have an FX2 come my way and test it out. It just means it would be on a different tank if it doesn't go on Fallen Forest. So it's like, do we want Fallen Forest to go like full super crazy cool, or do we want just like, yeah, we made something that looks pretty, but also like we're normal aquatic people here. We're gonna put a normal canister filter on this thing and not go like hog wild with the bajillion-dollar monstrosity. Also, rainbows are dumb, and I'm very scared about putting glassware on that tank because they'll ram right into it. Did I just spoil what I'm putting in there? Rainbows? That's got to be obvious with me, right? We're going to put rainbow fish in this thing? Come on. We know that's going to happen. We know. Just which rainbow fish? That's the real question. Okay, so earlier there was a question about the Afzone Athra, and I'll answer this. My opinions on it. I can't give you any opinions as far as its functionality or anything like that. What I can say is it is a nice alternative to the ultra expensive fancy filter. If you really want that beautiful stainless steel look, or you want something that's like the body, you can't possibly hurt the body like you can with a plastic one. However, I think it's really catering only to those people who want that very high-end, expensive look. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it because the pump on it is actually a fairly interesting pump. And especially giving its DC controllable, you can mess with the flow rate. So you could dial the flow back, and that tank could work on something as small as like 20 gallons, or that filter rather, could work as small as something at 20 gallons, or go all the way up to something much bigger. Yeah, get them fancy things. Hey, Kelly, to answer you really quickly, Kelly, go crazy. This is your wedding tank. Yeah, kind of is my wedding tank in a sense. I suggest the stainless steel intake overflow. So you know what really sucks? Almost all the stainless steel intakes and outflows are like 15 plus inches long on the side. They're designed to go on very large tanks or on big cabinets. And my tank sits in a rack system, right? So it doesn't have that big open drop distance. Now, I guess if I did it off the back, you could probably figure something out, but it might be really hard to maintain at that point. But yeah. Yeah. I only want the fancy stainless version because it could withstand 2 small kids and a lifetime of abuse. Yeah, I mean, that's a nice thing. If you're worried about your kids, I would definitely consider the metal monstrosity. As it can take some abuse. Oh, man. Oh, man. Wow, you guys are really in favor of the... Really in favor. That's impressive. Now, granted, 42 votes. We'll see. That might change, but so far, we actually like that FX2. To be fair, I'm probably going to let my wife make that decision. But I was just curious what you guys thought. You know what it is. Okay, so we're going to open questions. If you guys do have questions, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see them. We'll start with Leo209, who gave me a $4.99 super chat. Thank you, Leo. Always appreciated, man. You're always such a supporter of the channel. You're just a blast. But what's your opinion on the Seachay canisters? I'm ready for this. I love my whale. Also heard good things about the Space Echo or whatever it's called. Yeah, I think it's Space Echo because it's a smaller canister, right? So here's the thing. I think Seachay makes very good pumps. I have yet to get my hands on some of the newer design Seachay products. However, the whale basically looks like the high door filter, and the high door filter had several problems with it. Now, hopefully, the Seachay filter has fixed those mechanical issues because they're solely in the design of the plastics in the body, and that's fixable, right? And it has to do with how the pump is aligned and all these kind of things. There's just some problems in those filters that make them prone to break down early. Too coolie for schoolie. So you held out false choice to us? Are you the government? This is the Republic of Bentley here, all right? I'm just curious more what chat likes, because I'll make a decision and it might be other people will be like, why would you even touch that thing? Who cares? This ain't some fancy 88 tank. Get out of here, I just get curious about your guys' opinions. It might not always be the thing, but we'll see. So anyway, back on the Seachay stuff. Seachay has really good pumps, right? That one of the best parts about the title series is the fact of the Seachay pump that's in it. It's just this very good pump. It's durable. It can take some abuse. Relatively quiet. All those kind of things. Isn't really prone to rattling because of the way it's designed. Unlike some of the impeller pumps that are in an AquaClear and stuff, they start to rattle over time. There's other problems with the body of the title, depending on what you're trying to do with it. But overall, good filter, phenomenal pump inside. And I think that's the biggest thing that CJ has going with their canisters is they have CJ pumps in them. And CJ pumps are very nice pumps. However, I was watching John's video from KG Tropicals, and I think it's the Space Echo, which also looks a lot like it's not a sun filter. There's another circular filter just like that, where it really looks like they used a similar Chinese manufacturer for the body, but then put CJ pumps in them. And that inherently worries me. So it's one of those things where I would be curious to get my hands on one, and I thought about reaching out to John and being like, hey man, send me one of these things. But we don't have that good a relationship, so he'd probably be like, you don't like Oscars, so no. And it's one of those things where I probably need to test it at some point to get a better opinion, but I like CJ pumps a lot. So inherently, my hope is some of the engineering flaws in some of those cheaper made Chinese canisters that have a similar body design to what I've seen in the Whale and the new Space Echoes are hopefully been resolved, right? Like they've seen where those problems are, seen that kind of feedback, had some re-engineering occur, and fixed those problems, and then slapped a really nice CJ pump in it and called it a day. And if that's the case, then they're probably great canisters. Their price point looks pretty decent. That's the one thing I will say that I like about them is, say, unlike some of the other stuff, one of the biggest qualms I have about Awaze is I feel like they're way too expensive for what you're getting. There's some good ingenuity in them and some interesting ideas, but I still think they're really overpriced. So, good question. Oh man, Rob Olson. What's up, buddy? Aquarium Guys podcast, if you're not familiar with Mr. Rob's. Saw a guy use a Bissell vac to make a canister filter. It was a lot of fun. Anywho, just saying howdy ho. Rob, we're going to have to chat soon. I hope you're going to Keystone Clash, because I want to be able to hang out with you in person, my friend. We've babbled enough on the internet. We need to actually sit down and talk in person. So yeah, it's one of those things where if they fix some of the small problems that led to leak issues and some other things in some of those other bodies, they're probably great, right? But if those problems haven't been fixed and it's basically just this with a small redesign and slap in the CJ pump, then I would worry that over time you're going to run into those same problems again. So we'll see. All right, we'll see. It's one of those things. I need to get my hands on one, though. Bob Purcell says, just bypass John and ask Lisa. You're probably onto something right there. I probably should just talk to Lisa. I know Lisa likes me. At least vaguely. PM me this Keystone Clash info, my guy. I got you, buddy. I got you. I'll send you the deets. It's out near Philly. You got an electric, you can make that drive. It'll be cheap. I'll pay your supercharging bill. Oh man. Okay, let me catch back up. I want to make sure I haven't missed a good question. Tommy O, what is your idea on the use of check valves on your tank? Okay, so do you mean check valves just in general, or check valves only with oxygen, check valves with CO2? Because there's kind of three ways. We'll start with CO2. Most of your diffusers have built-in check valves, or at least the ones that I tend to buy do. So I don't need check valves with my CO2. I almost always, there's very rare occasions where I don't, but almost always use check valves when I'm using oxygen. The only time you don't need a check valve is if the line is entirely above and the pump is entirely above the water line. You technically do not need a check valve in that case because there's not enough siphon to beat gravity the entire time if it's always traveling up. When it goes up a little bit and then goes down, because usually we'll have a pump down kind of beside a tank, or maybe it's under the tank, whatever it may be, that's where check valves are absolutely critical, because at any time should you lose power, there is a chance that it will create that small amount of suction and flood your pump. And I have flooded pumps in the past when I forgot like a dum-dum and didn't put a check valve in, or told myself, oh, I'm out of check valves. I'll run it without a check valve for now, and then forgot the next week when I went in to pick up a check valve, and then inevitably had some kind of power flicker or some other issue, or a cat stepped on or knocked over a thing or whatever and caused the power to go off for that particular pump. And then all of a sudden I've had a 4 outlet pump that was like a $60 air pump get flooded and be completely wasted and have no power whatsoever. It basically was like, I might as well be, trying to use a full house fan to blow into a small tube to put air into my tank. AKA it don't work, right? It was like one bubble, because once that water gets into the electronics and all that kind of stuff, the diaphragm action is never the same from there on out once the pump floods. Or at least it's really rare to recover one when that happens. So if you ever have the pump below the water line, so that line is going up and over and down, absolutely have a check valve. Same thing can be said with CO2 if you know that you don't have some kind of check valve built into whatever your diffuser is. Now, inline diffusers don't need them. You're okay there. It's usually just an in-tank diffuser. Reactors don't need them. That's part of the way they're designed. You don't ever really have to worry about that kind of stuff. Because at that point, typically, the actual line itself, where the air is coming from, is above the water line in those cases, because the water line is now moved down to wherever that reactor or inline diffuser is. That's like the general rule that I follow, and when I do use check valves. I tend to use check valves as a safety precaution almost always, just because a check valve costs me like $1.50. It's dirt cheap, safe and sorry, doesn't really hurt you. But there are some rare occasions where I just don't, and that's usually when I have, like I said, diffusers that have built-in stuff, or if I'm running, like, an example would be when you're running a linear air piston and you keep it up high in your room, and then you're running it in a PVC pipes and lines just come down, they don't have that loop, right? You don't need check valves in those cases. Water can't keep traveling upward. It doesn't have enough power to do so. You're not going to create enough vacuum to do that. But if you want to play it paranoid, spend the bucks a line and put in some check valves, or do what I did and make a deal with a guy who bought out an old fish store and just have like literally a box, like, trying to think how big this thing is. It's like about yay across and about this deep, and it's just full of old school check valves, which one of these days I'll have to show you these because they're huge. They're like, I'm trying to find a container that's similar sized. I have this TDS checking solution. These check valves are almost as big as this bottle in my hand. So think like a standard prescription size bottle, but a little fatter. It's literally how big these check valves are. They're from like the 80s or 70s. They're super old school. These are just big chunky things. It's kind of hilarious, really. Whoa. Hello, Chad Jump. That's how you know Bentley talks too much. Sid Miller, I've got a 17 gal getting ready at the moment and wanted to do Ankfa natives. Would 6 peacock gobies and 10 pseudo signifer be all right? Entirely depends on your filtration choice and how often you do your water maintenance. If you're doing regular water changes like 50% a week, yeah, you should be fine. And you're not overfeeding too much, you should be fine. If you're trying to do like, I'm only going to water change like once a month, and I only clean my filter once a month, and I'm just using a sponge, that might be a little too much. Now, granted, the signifiers don't get too big, and the peacock gobies aren't huge. You mean gobies, not gudgeons, right? If you mean gudgeons, we're talking a different game, because peacock gudgeons get kind of big. But yeah, that would be what I would say. Nabokov fan, so I have some experience with the non-title C-Chase stuff. I'm unimpressed. As a design engineer, they really screwed up the plastics choice. Beware what reviews they say, what reviews say when they say that it's a good slash super quality product because of the pump. Pump and impellers all vary in design, varieties done by the egg internal thing. Beware the plastics on some of their stuff. Yeah, so that leads into part of my initial worry about some of those products is like the Hydro one is known for being built with really cheap plastic. And whatever the circular one is that's very similar to the Echo, I just can't remember who makes it. I don't think it's Sun, but somebody else. Um, that was also made with really cheap plastic. And they had all sorts of issues with not sealing correctly, easy to crack, stuff like that. So it's unfortunate if that's the case with Siche. I would generally trust you, right? We've had a few conversations. You're in the engineering field, much like me, so we tend to look at things a little different. But I saw it's one of those things where I want to get my hands on it and actually like see it, you know, in person. Although if you have messed with one, like send me a bunch of pictures. I want to see if they fix the problems in some of the pump locations because there were some seal problems in some of the Chinese made ones. Not Siche, the previous versions that have a similar body shape, that is. But yeah, I'd be curious. You know, I'll probably still test one anyway. Bill Coleman, I have thought of installing an inline pre-filter and loading up biomedia in the FX4. Yeah, so you can. There are ways to pre-filter the FX series. Like you can remove that particular intake that they use and replace it with a different intake. There's all sorts of stuff that will fit that piping, similar to like the intake that's on. Even though I hate the canister, the Sun HW5000, like it's basically designed to mimic as much as it can in several points the FX6. So if you were to able to find spare parts for that intake tube, you could wire it up to the FX4's tube system. There's some other parts you could do. There's ways to like get some of the stuff that comes off of the 07 series, like a 407, and damper it down and get it to fit. That will allow you to get something that's much easier to add a pre-filter on of some form. You could also get like, you know, the square sheets of foam and like build your own pre-filter around it if you wanted to go a little crazy and just use some zip ties to hold it in place. That's another option. You know, things like that. But yeah, I think anytime you pre-filter a lot of canisters, it really does reduce the maintenance. That's part of why the Awaze is nice. It has built-in pre-filters that socket into the body. You've got a lot of different options if you don't like it super fine. If you love it super fine where your water comes out crystal clear and well polished, that's great. You just got to service it regularly, and by regularly I mean at least once a week to keep your flow up and keep it happy. You can bring it down to like 40 or 30 PPI. They have a bunch of different versions. I like the 40. It's been working pretty good for me. But then I still ended up adding a pre-filter because my tank is full of so much Java Fern. It produces lots of baby Java Fern, and that Java Fern plugs up the intake really fast. So I ended up having to get a pre-filter sponge mostly to prevent that stuff from plugging up the intake. And also just the general like waste that gets produced in that tank. It adds a little extra fishy sludge. Fish Froom Fever just wanted to say hello while the internet is okay. Hey buddy, good to see you. I hope I get to see you at the Clash too, man. We gotta do like a redo of the Waffle House, although it might be at something else, but you know what I'm talking about. Late night, just babbling dumb stuff, eating cheap food. It's great. It's great. Namaka fan, all I can ask, beg, plead, whichever filter you choose, please get the spray bar kit. More people need to see and use them. I was actually looking at potentially doing, there's a third-party spray bar on Amazon. I need to go look up the name of it real fast. That I was looking at potentially using. Geez, I was just looking at this thing too, and I must have closed it. It's Flow Tamer. Right, it's all made out of PVC. It's actually a pretty elegant little design, and it's simple, right? It's very similar to what Master Breeder Dean built for his tank with his lungfish when he had the lungfish. But I was looking at one of those. I was actually kind of interested in doing that for the for Fallen Forest. So we'll see. Depends on how things go. I'm kind of trying to figure stuff out and seeing what will work well and what might not work well with my fishy friends that will be going in that tank relatively soon. But yeah, spray bars are pretty awesome. Like I have a spray bar on the Waze that is in the 75 long where my Blahari are, the ones that you guys see in the back of the videos that has all the Java fern in it, right? There's a spray bar on that, and I love it. I don't have the full length of the spray bar. It's only one unit because I have a bunch of other stuff in that tank. Like there's one of the Zis bubble bios is still sitting in like the middle of that tank, and there's some sponge filters and stuff. So there's only so much room for that spray bar to go across. But when it's pumping, dude, I love that thing. It spreads the flow out just enough, gives a nice amount of turbulence at the top of the water to just get some good oxygenation, easy peasy. Love it. Like Geek Boy, cats are the source of so many tragedies. Fixed it for you, Kelly Foreman. Oh, Lord. It's not just aquarium tragedies, just tragedies, period. Oh, man. That's all right, man. Cats are wonderful, too. Frank Birkin, thanks to KG Tropical's review, I'm thinking of CJ Space Echo 200 for my 40 breeder to replace a Title 55. Comments. I personally, Frank, I haven't had my hands on it. And by the way, thank you for becoming a member. I really appreciate that. I haven't had my hands on it. So, like, we kind of had discussed this a little bit, and Nabokov fan has mentioned some things. That Echo is a similar design to another Chinese-made filter that I've seen in the past. However, there is the potential they fix some of the problems, although from some feedback I've heard, the plastics haven't had the upgrade they really need to be much more durable, which is a problem. However, it has a CJ pump in it, right? And the one thing I love when it comes to anything CJ-wise is their pumps. They make wonderful pumps, but if the body of the filter is relatively fragile, or some of the other engineering issues that were in, I can't remember which manufacturer made this, so my apologies, as I don't remember the name of the filter that shares almost the exact same body design. If the engineering issues in that filter haven't been fixed, then having a CJ pump doesn't matter. It will still run into problems. So my hope is to eventually get one of the CJs in my hands and give it some testing myself. But like I said, we inherently have to be skeptical of anything that says this is the best thing ever if they are selling it, right? We also need to do that. We should always have some semblance of skeptical nature, or just at least be willing to question anyone who does a review, and this includes myself, obviously, does a review where they received a product for free. And especially more so if they're being paid to promote that product. So if they received a product and are being paid for it. Now, I've received several products. I have a hard stipulation. I will not accept a product if I can't be 100% honest. And if they ever want a preview or to have input on what I do in a video, I will never accept products from anyone. That's not happening. I work in the test realm for my profession. So if I don't have the opportunity to test openly and honestly, it's not worth my time. That's just personal ethics, right? But you should, even with me saying those are my personal ethics, you should still, anytime I have a review, have your own questions. That's okay. That's good, right? That's important. We should always question certain things. But you can add levels if somebody is financially incentivized to say this is the greatest thing ever, right? It's something I've always preached because I used to work in marketing and I kind of understand that stuff. But I love CJ pumps, like plain and simple. One of the biggest reasons why I like the title, the CJ pump that's inside it. If I could find a way to get a CJ pump in a body more similar to an AquaClear, where I don't have that stupid skimmer, it's the only thing I don't like about the damn title, I'd be really happy. Because the impeller pumps that are in the AquaClears, not the biggest fan of. There's some other design elements in AquaClear I don't necessarily like, but there's the same that I could say for Tidal too, right? So it's one of those things. What I would say is, on a 40 breeder, the Echo 200, by its pure specs, and as long as you're being careful when you maintain it, and if it's held in a cabinet to where you don't have things like ramming into it like a cat or a kid, you should be fine. But I just personally can't give you really good in-depth feedback because I haven't had my hands on one yet. And I hope that makes sense. Uh-oh. Johnny's always got to ask me all these interesting questions. Forgive me. The seasonal swings of weather always mess with my sinuses. Whoa, big skip. Oh, I see Alex in chat. There's trouble. There's trouble. What's up, birthday boy? Oh, man. Johnny, where'd your question go? I gotta find it down. No. Chat jumped at me. Then I lost you. Hold on, Johnny. Hold on, buddy. Oh, old eyes, don't betray me now. It's literally the guy with "at" in his name. Come on, brain. Can't find these things? There it is. Thoughts on Hediotis Salzmani? And you always think I know every single one of these names, don't you? I need to look it up. I need to see it. I'm such a visual person, dude. Oh, yeah. This is stuff that's kind of similar to Bacopa and its leaf structure, except that it's long and thin. It doesn't get quite as big and round. So, okay. I haven't grown this plant yet, but I have done research on it well. I've seen a lot of people say it does well without CO2. I kind of question that just because anytime it's going to be dependent on a lot of other parameters, mostly your light. Because anytime you have those more narrow leaves on a plant, they inherently usually need much stronger light. But then if you have CO2, you can kind of dial that back a little bit. It's a nice leaf shape, especially for a bright green plant. It's not common, with the exception of maybe the Rotala green. But the Rotala green, as I recall, is a slightly darker color. Not as quite as like bright green. It's more of I think like Java ferns, where they have that good deep green to them, but not like that more yellowish green, which the Salzmani kind of has, that much brighter, lighter green color. But yeah, I don't have a ton of experience with it on hand. It's one of the few plants that I haven't touched. It basically started becoming more available when I went into my like, I'm going to pause going like bat-esque crazy on plants all the time and just chill out for a bit. Carl Works, what brand check valve do you use? And do you need CO2 rated ones? So in my case, I always use CO2. When I'm using CO2, I have things that have built-in check valves. So I don't ever need a special check valve just to run my CO2 lines. This is a personal choice. That's just when I do my shopping, that's what I do. You probably don't need a CO2 rated one unless you're running the line really, really high pressure. Like we're talking 50 PSI or higher. If you're running the line anywhere around where I usually do, which is somewhere about 35 PSI, you wouldn't need a special check valve to do that. You'd be okay with a standard check valve. Brand of check valve I've used a bunch of different ones. I have, like I said, these big, chonky, old school ones that look almost like a CO2 reactor than a check valve. And I only use those in a couple spaces because they're so big and chonky. I want them hidden. But for the most part, I use the smaller, the same one that Aquarium Co-op carries. I think Zis makes it now, but they've been made by a number of different Chinese manufacturers. Small clear plastic one has a little black internal piece. It used to be red at one point. Instead of like those super small check valves that are solid, like blue plastic, and you get some of those cheap kits. I don't generally trust those as much. I like the slightly larger ones that are about, yay big or so. But yeah, is there a specific manufacturer I go to? Not really. They're all kind of the same. They're all made by like one or two companies in China in mass and just have a name stamped on them until you start looking at like fancier designs that are more expensive. And you don't need those. You really don't. Hope that helps you there, Koro. All right. Trying to catch up to chat here because I am well behind. Planted Goldies, what type of plant is Hygrophila compacta? Will it send runners any special care? Well, it's a Hygrophila. Sorry, I'm being a jerk. So, it's Hygrophila compacta especially is a more reedy stem plant, so it's usually not going to send things by runners. What it's going to do is a lot like Alternanthera reinekii. It tends to build side shoots, and you'll break those side shoots off and replant those. Um, but it grows like more stems do, so eventually you can grow side shoots that come off of it and break them off. If you clip the top because it's getting too tall, it will grow some more out of the top. But usually compacted doesn't get so tall that you need to actually trim it back down. It's going to build you more side shoots, and you can plant those out. Any special care? Not really. It Compact is a relatively easy plant. Just give it some decent light. It likes about medium light because it's a stem. Most of your stems like medium to high light. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward and simple. It's a nice, easy, beautiful green plant. Hope that helps. Mystery Snail Gardens. Snailed it. What's up? Good to see you, Guardians. All right. Secret history living in your aquarium. Speaking of the birthday boy, the troublemaker himself. I made a PVC flow bar when I had my Hillstream 40-gallon setup. Ah, cool. I don't know that I ever saw that in person, did I? Did I see that in person? I can't remember. Rainbows love them oxygen and swimming. Yeah, I mean, rainbows like flow and oxygenation, but plenty of them come from lakes too, so you'd be surprised. Rainbows can handle a lot of stuff, but in general, the one thing that matters is well-oxygenated water and relatively clean water, just because that's what they come from. They come from areas with tons of rainfall, and so they inherently get tons and tons and tons of free water changes, basically put. Coralworks. Okay, I know they're theoretically a bigger flood risk, but why not make a custom mini sump instead of a canister filter? Good question. So in the case where I don't have a tank that is drilled, I hate overflow boxes. Overflow boxes have their own inherent risk on top of the then risk that you have for having some kind of sump when it comes to flooding. And when you just add too many problems without, say, bulkheads helping you out, I won't go that route. Now, if I'm drilling tanks, I'm way more interested in playing with sumps and using sumps. So an example would be whenever I can do my garage, I'm going to have some acrylic custom displays made, and those will all run on sumps. And they'll be wired and all that kind of stuff to go straight to a sump. So it's just a choice when it comes to the way the tank is set up initially. And if I'm not planning for it right from the get-go, I don't like adding on like the overflow box and doing that kind of work to make a sump work, because it just adds too many layers of risk that I don't want to deal with. I hope that makes sense. Nabokov fan, is the small nano Ciche canister a Penplax rehash? Are you talking about the Space Echo? Maybe that's who it is. It's the Penplax that made that thing. Let me just go to Ciche's website and look at things real fast. Because there's the Whale, which is the same as the Hydor, and that Hydor was kind of not great. But hopefully they fixed some of those problems. Let me see here. What are we looking at? Filters. Now, you don't mean the... Are you talking about like the Space Echo or the internal canisters, like the Shark Pro? Because maybe. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it is Penplax that... Oh, Lord. Why does Penplax have such a horrible website? Well, they have that micro canister. They literally call it the Canister. If you're thinking about that teeny tiny thing, and that's closer to... it's not the same design as the Oase, but it's closer to the smaller Oases. Then they have those like weird things that have the blue body on them. And that's designed after another different filter too. I'm having to go through like Penplax's range. No, it's not that thing. Maybe it's one of the older models. It's not on their active website. Can't be sure. I don't know. I'll have to go digging and figure that out. I found I'm good at testing patience. My wife can attest that. Kingfisher's catch. Passion fruit. Important question. What ppm nitrates does 1 ppm convert to after it goes through nitrification? Dealing with high tank nitrates and high tap ammonia, trying to decide whether or not to water change. Okay. So in general, how much ammonia is in your tap? And can you put water in a container and treat that water and put like an air stone in it for 24 hours before doing that water change? AKA, can we bind up all the ammonia safely ahead of time so that the only thing we're dealing with is nitrates? Now, 1 ppm nitrate is not that much. And nitrates are kind of the end of the nitrification cycle. Now, everything in denitrification, where they convert nitrates backwards, right, by removing oxygen from it, that's a different story. And you would be much better off asking Kelly Foreman than me. I'm not that sciencey. Sorry, my guy or gal. I'm not that smart. I'm just a dope on the internet. Woo! But yeah. Realistically, if you're dealing with that high tap stuff and you have a way like think like those big black tote containers that you see people use as like temporary tanks and quarantine tanks, if you have a way to put your water in there with an air stone and add your water treater, right, so that it binds up all the ammonia and gets it safe for even if it's a few hours, but realistically you'd like to do 24 hours to be safest before doing that water change, that would be more the route I would go if it was possible, if I was dealing with a situation like yours. At Belly, I've resorted to putting random stuff behind every hob so they're tilted way more than the wedge it comes with. So many damn overflows due to plant debris in the plant. Yeah, I know that problem. I know that problem. Wendy is sidetracked. I love that name. Saw a plant I didn't recognize, like hairgrass or brush, but only a few spears per plant and a larger round seed head on the tips. Cool looking, any idea? So most likely what you're looking at is some kind of eriocolon. Let me spell it out in chat for you. The most common one is Ereo Vietnam, which is kind of a small grass bush looking thing that can get those. That's how it flowers. And sometimes the flowers will open up underwater, but they're not going to look like a flower the way that we think about them, right? They look kind of funky. But most likely that's a species of eriocolon. There are, trying to remember, there is another kind of grass species that puts those little things up. But yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alex, for mentioning that. Cypress helferi also does the same thing if it was grown immersed and then put into a tank. So yeah. But that's probably what you're looking at. Most likely an Ereo. Wendy, if you do have a moment, this is my email, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Shoot me a picture real fast. And just be like, hey, I talked about this silly hairgrass-looking plant. Here's a picture. And I should be able to tell you roughly whether it's an Ereo. I won't be able to tell you exactly what species or something else. If you want to have a little more assurance as to what that plant is. Okay, gang. So let's see. Talk about canisters for a little bit. if you missed that, like by all means, check it out on the replay. We babbled about it for a little bit. We did a poll. Let's look at the final results of the poll before we run away here. Ooh, man. So, in your guys' opinion, my snap question for you guys is 55% in favor of the FX2, with only 45% in favor of F-Zone's fancy boy. For the Astra. That's very interesting. So you guys are super interested in that FX2. Well, good news. I have to officially respond, but I'll have an FX2 coming my way sometime in the near future, and we'll do some testing on it, and we'll talk about it. We'll load it up with bioeffects and do testing on that, because my stupid FX6 that I was testing it in went kaput within like 2 weeks, because I think something got in the impeller and I haven't had time to rip it apart. Omar, have you considered an Eheim? I have a couple of old Eheims lying around that I could, in theory, do. I just hate maintaining Eheims. If I'm going to be honest, Eheim filters are the filters I hate doing maintenance on the absolute most. I'm sure there's somebody on Etsy who makes like a tray system that fits in Eheims, and then that would make me stop complaining about Eheims immediately. But they bug me to like no end. I do love the Eheim like substrat, their small little media balls that they use. They're fantastic. I just like that media in general. But yeah, that's my jam. It's my jam. What can I say? Fishman has a video about why he hates Eheim canisters. Getter filters do. There's some other things about Eheim that kind of suck, but the Eheim quick connects are like a gold standard in the industry just because they're so effective. Also, like sometimes priming an Eheim can be a pain in the butt. There's ways to fix that problem, but yeah. I have my hacks to make things easy. Well, you do own a fish store, sir. I would hope so. I'm just a dope on the internet, man. Yeah, I actually like. One thing I do love about Eheims is they're built like freight trains. It's like nigh impossible to kill them, and they will just take a ticking and take a beating and keep on ticking. Right? They're fantastic in that regard. And there's all sorts of good stuff. But yeah. Oh, passion fruit. My mistake. I meant 1 ppm ammonia turns into what ppm nitrates. So as it's being consumed steadily less and less. So effectively speaking, 1 ppm ammonia will slowly become not that much nitrates and not enough to be scary. Just put it that way. Not enough to be scary. Hope that helps you, passion fruit. Anyway. Tail end here. Alex, thank you, buddy, for the $10 super chat. Love the product testing reviews. Wish I caught more live streams. Well, I mean, we kind of live stream like side to side, so I can understand where it's a little tough. And congrats on the wedding. Thanks, dude. You and I need to get together here relatively soon and go have some lunch, or maybe like take a trip out to Redfish, Bluefish, something like that, right? And just catch up, babble, do all those usual fish nerd things that we do. All right, gang. With that being said, we're at time. I'm gonna go run downstairs to have dinner with my lovely wife. Speaking of the things, Omar mentions that he's had Eheims running for 30 plus years with some of his customers. You hear that? 30 plus years in an Eheim. Old Eheims, the best. They're built so well. So well. They're like old Jabal Jaeger heaters. They're invincible. Anyway, gang, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to Secret History Living Inside Your Aquarium, Robbie Olson, and Leo209 for your super chats, Fishroom Fever and Frank Birkin for your membership. As always, gang, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.